Welcome to the Faculty Forum Online, a program of the MIT Alumni Association. I'm Judy Cole, and I'm the EVP and CEO of the Alumni Association, and I will serve as the moderator. Alumni who wish to ask a question, enter your first name and your location, and the question on the form on your screen, and we will try to answer as many questions as possible. Our guest today is Institute Professor Marcus Thompson. For those of you not familiar with his career, Professor Thompson joined the MIT faculty in 1973, making this his 42nd year on the faculty. Professor Thompson was named Robert R. Taylor Professor of Music in 1995. The same year, he earned the Margaret McVicker Faculty Fellow honor for exceptional teaching. An accomplished violist, Professor Thompson founded MIT's performance programs in private studies and chamber music. He is also a member of the viola faculty at the New England Conservatory of Music and a violist and artistic director of the Boston Chamber Music Society. An alumnus of Juilliard in New York, where he grew up, Professor Thompson has traveled and recorded extensively as a violist. He has performed as soloist with the Boston Pops, the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, the Cleveland Orchestra, the National Symphony, the Atlanta Symphony, the St. Louis Symphony, and the Philadelphia Orchestra. Last August, Professor Thompson was named Institute Professor, a title held by only 13 current MIT faculty. Professor Thompson, thank you for joining us. It's your 42nd year here at MIT. Please start by telling us a little bit about your current projects in this 42nd year.
Thank you, Judy. It's a pleasure to be here. In the 42nd year, it looks a little bit like it has looked in a few of the other years leading up to this. As you said, I'm a violist, and so I play the viola in a number of different ways, as a chamber musician, as a soloist, as a recitalist. And so this is my 7th season as artistic director of the Boston Chamber Music Society. I've been with them as a player for the past, since 1984, so however many years that is. And so we perform concerts at Harvard Sanders Theater every month, and we're now in the midst of creating programs for the following season, but that is an ongoing project that happens every year and has happened every year for over 30 years. As a recitalist, each year I play a series of recitals somewhere in the country. One year it was Arizona, another year it was Washington State. This year it will be in Texas, starting next week. And the Piatigorsky Foundation promotes concerts for libraries, schools, assisted living facilities in different parts of the country. And I've done that a lot because, for one thing, it's the way musicians keep up your craft, and it's another way of connecting very closely with your audience. So we play approximately 7 concerts in a week, and I'll be going to do that next week. I'll be playing recitals one recital in Montreal in April. That will be the 2 Brahms sonatas for viola and piano, or they're originally for clarinet and piano, but Brahms designated them also for viola and piano, with a friend who's an alumna of MIT. She's a professional pianist who lives there. We decided to do this. And in March, I will be premiering a piece called Shadow Light by Elena Rohr for solo viola and orchestra with the New Orchestra of Washington in Washington, D.C. Elena and I just got into a conversation about having her write me a piece, and she said, well, okay, here's a piece, and where would you like to play it with this orchestra in Washington? And of course, I was delighted. So,
oh, that's great. It makes me think, does the MIT Club of Washington, D.C. know about this?
I think they probably will.
Now they will.
Now they will, and
for sure.
The Council for the Arts at MIT has mentioned to me that they would be in contact about that too.
Oh, good.
So I think there will be we'll try to get a crowd.
We can get you a very friendly crowd, I'm sure.
Oh, thank you very much. And it's in the first weekend of March, and I think we're playing it several times that weekend before recording it on the following Monday. So,
Excellent. Were there other, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Were there other
No,
projects?
I think those would sort of count as the projects that I work on as a professional working musician. Of course, I also have students at New England Conservatory, and I'm still teaching full-time in all of my programs here at MIT.
Where do you find time to practice?
Well, I find the time to practice first, and then I do everything else after that.
I sort of assumed that to be the case.
Yes. So I try to do that.
So while we give the alumni a little bit of time to enter their own questions, let me ask you another one or two of my own. I know that music is one of the most popular minors at MIT, with more than 2,000 students enrolled each year in music or theater arts courses. What is so special or unique about music at MIT, in your opinion?
Well, the faculty is very high quality, and unlike a few other schools where the best are reserved for the majors and for those going into the profession, there is no such barrier at MIT. So there is a very close contact for people of all levels of skill. So I think that's probably the most immediate thing, because you will find quality musicians teaching everywhere, but to be able to have contact with them is something that I think is unique to MIT.
So at other places, the most renowned musicians would only be teaching certain number of students or selected majors as opposed to all students?
Yes, I think so. I think you'll find that some of the greatest performers are available only to the people in the graduate programs or the professional studies programs. And at MIT, you can, as an undergraduate, you can meet those people very early on and work with them.
I think that's true of many departments at MIT.
Yes.
So we're starting to get some questions from the alumni, so let me ask their questions. Dick from Walla Walla, Washington asks, how did a professional violist come to an otherwise considered technical school as part of a department of music? When I tell people that I know you and your role at MIT, they think I'm spoofing.
Hi, Dick. We write to each other frequently, so. I'm not sure I know the answer to that. I think I knew very early on in my life that I wanted to have teaching as part of my life, and college teaching. Teaching on the college level was very important. High school and anything below is just it's just not my thing. And so I immediately after leaving Juilliard, I took one college teaching job after another, and I ended up at MIT. I think I received the announcement for the position from the Juilliard Placement Service, and I remember reading the ad and thinking, oh, that sounds just like me. That sounds like something I would like to do. And then guess what? I didn't apply.
Why not?
Because I was perfectly happy in the job I had. I was at Mount Holyoke College, and I thought, well, this is fine. I don't, I'm a New Yorker. Why would I want to live in Boston? And then I think so. I passed on the job, and I think a year later, the job at Mount Holyoke was coming to a close. And I was contacted again by someone from MIT, and they said the position was still open, and why don't I come in and talk to someone about it? And I came in and met each of the senior faculty, and we talked, and the rest
One
is
thing
history.
led to another.
Yes.
They were holding it for you.
Maybe.
Maybe. Who knows? So June in Washington, D.C. asks, what is your involvement in the MIT Symphony Orchestra, and how has it grown since I left 10 years ago?
Oh, 10 years ago. Well, the MIT Symphony is thriving, and large, filled with students. I think the numbers of students versus, let's say, alums or professionals or people like other people other than MIT residents has gradually changed, so that many talented students come and have filled out the ranks. The music director is Adam Boyles. He's a very gifted, talented conductor who came to us a little over 10 years ago from Arizona, and has just done a brilliant job of being able to welcome a large audience. He's probably one of the most welcoming people. I think his concerts take place for the largest audience that we have for any of our public music programs. And he has collaborated with the choral program and with the theater program, and has performed with many soloists, and has introduced the community to a lot of wonderful repertoire.
So do I infer correctly from your answer that there was a point in time where the orchestra was unable to fill all the seats with current students, and so they went outside of the
Yes.
student population in order to
Yes.
fill out the orchestra?
That's true.
And you're
yes.
saying that now, more recently, we're not having that problem anymore?
We're having it a lot less than we used to. I think given the nature of the student population, there'll always be slight fluctuations here and there. But when you have two harpists in the orchestra and a full complement of winds and a wonderful cello section as we have now, and you see many things that you hadn't seen before. So.
That's an interesting comment about how the student body may have changed some over time as well.
Yes, well, I think it's changed because of a greater involvement of the faculty in selecting students who have musical backgrounds. And I think it's important for alumni to know that when they're talking to young people that they meet who are interested in going to MIT and who have a musical background, that they can have a first-rate musical time here, and if they submit a musical supplement along with their application, that those supplements, and usually these are performances on tape, are seen by the faculty.
And that can enhance their chances of admission?
That can enhance their chances. We certainly have a chance to point out the ones who would be the most useful for us. And I know over the years we've said, well, we're having a little shortage in cellists. What can we do about that? And so when we see a cellist who's really good and who also qualifies academically, I think people make the effort. And it's not just cellists, in every instrument,
Right.
Every instrument category. We've seen that, and I think that's one of the factors that's helped the growth of the MIT Symphony.
Fascinating. So Tom in Woburn asks, have you had the opportunity to do any music instrument research with any other professors at MIT, possibly a new way of making a composite stringed instrument like the violin or viola?
Personally, I haven't. I know that in this region there are people who do. Things like the Lewis and Clark have made instruments out of carbon fiber. And there's a great deal of interest in instrument making and acoustics that divided, around the institute. So personally, I haven't been involved in instrument building or instrument making, but I know that is a strong interest here, and it's an interest of our department. It's one that we are looking at in terms of music and technology.
So Ken in Boston asks, how do funding cuts in the arts in this century affect music departments like MIT's?
Funding cuts within the university or outside of the university?
I think he's the way it's worded, it sounds to me like he is referring to the general cut in funding for the arts, not necessarily at MIT, but sort of in society. Has it spilled over to MIT maybe?
Well, I can answer that on two levels. In society, I think there's within the Boston region, I think there's a kind of growing realization that the arts are not just fun and games, that there's a huge industry here. There are many people employed. There's a lot of money being exchanged, a lot of careers being built. The entertainment industry, just in general, is, and I say that especially focusing on the fine arts, is something that really has to be seen as a very strong, important part of the Massachusetts economy. And so, trying to get our legislatures and politicians to understand that when they talk about the economy, people are thinking about, well, there are jobs that are needed here, well, those are jobs,
right?
And there really is an economic exchange that is beneficial to the region. And when they start thinking about that, I think they'll understand that funding in is not just matched by what comes out, but that it actually grows. It's exponential.
Well, and I think there's also a lot of a growing understanding, a deepening understanding as we learn more about the brain and how it works. There's a deepening appreciation of the importance of the arts to cognitive development and
Absolutely.
the way in which it can enhance a person's ability to perform in other areas.
Well, I'm glad that you said that, because it just so happens that today, in HuffPost Science, there's an article about the changes in the brain brought about by playing music. And this article was prepared based on research done by one of the students in a chamber music class that I have. And her name is Melinda McPherson, and she's a brilliant young violist who studied at Peabody Conservatory and came to MIT to do PhD work. And this is part and parcel of what she's doing. And so every once in a while you hear that working in the arts and working in music enhances cognitive and other kind of creative work. But here people are actually showing it. And,
proving it, yeah.
And it's very timely, because today the article is
there.
is there. So everybody go look at that article, and you'll see what we're talking about. But let me get back to talking about funding cuts and how they affected our department. Because I answered it in terms of what happens in the public arena. But at MIT, maybe 20 years ago or more, it's hard to remember, the years go by so fast, we were faced with a kind of economic crisis, which I think was met with the word re-engineering, so that whole budgets were restructured, and people had to think of ways to accommodate the resources we had and still be strong. Well, one of the things that did for our department was to force us to find ways to collaborate among each other. Instead of hiring a symphony orchestra to sing with the chorus, we had the MIT Symphony perform with the chorus. And we've been very creative at finding all kinds of ways to internally collaborate. And I think some of those collaborations brought in more students, more student activity, and may have also led to the situation I was describing with the symphony, that we were able to actually grow the number of students because the students felt a greater ownership of the organization and didn't feel it was just a community organization, but it was one in which they had an opportunity to learn. And of course, in those greater numbers, and they're able to use these ensembles that we have as a way of fulfilling the humanities and arts requirement. They can get subject credit for that, so towards the degree, and you can of course use it as a concentrator or as a minor or as a major.
Well, that all makes sense. Eric in Cambridge asks, I'm not a musician, but I'm fascinated by the interaction between the performers in string quartets during performances. What string quartets inspire you, and what's it like to be a violist in a quartet?
Good question. I've never been a full-time violist in a professional string quartet. I have been a guest violist filling in for an absent member. And that happened on a couple of occasions, once with the Cleveland Quartet and once with the Lydian Quartet. what goes on in a string quartet is like what goes on in any family. You know, we think we know. It seems generic, but it really is very, very personal. And playing together in a string quartet is something that I absolutely adore. I don't know if you know that string players, for fun, after they've played music all day long or played in an orchestra or something like that, they'll go home and gather a bunch of friends and play string quartets with one another.
I didn't know that.
That's what we do for fun when we're done playing, you know, professionally. And I've done that on so many occasions, I can't tell you. But the literature is absolutely fascinating.
Mm.
And I learned, I think my involvement in chamber music comes from a very early age. My parents and my sister and I used to sing together as a quartet, as a family, at home. Mm-hmm. And believe it or not, what you learn in that is how to feel and to interact, how to blend, how to fit in, how to take the lead, how to follow, how to tune, how to balance. All of these things are things that seem to apply to music, but you know they apply to life as well.
Absolutely.
And you know there isn't necessarily written literature for that kind of family interaction as there is for, let's say, a professional string quartet. But I think the string quartet and chamber music in general grows out of that kind of familial interaction. And certainly the earliest string quartets that we know of, you know, there was a string quartet that had Mozart playing the viola in Haydn's string quartet, and Hummel, another composer, playing within the quartet. And Haydn wrote well over 70 string quartets, and Mozart wrote a large number, and Beethoven after that wrote, and Beethoven, of course, played the viola. And
I didn't know that.
Oh, he did. You know, a lot of the great composers did. So playing the viola in an ensemble like that really involves seeing the world from the inside out. Mm. You are playing always in relation to something very strong under you, the fundamental bass, you know, the cello part. And of course, you're always trying to figure out whether your primary role is in being an overtone for the bass instrument, or for being up with the two violins. So you're either tenor or tenor or another alto or something else. Sometimes
you're kind of the hinge pin in the middle.
That's right, and all of these, you know, the string quartet and chamber music of this type, whether it's a quintet that involves an extra cello or an extra viola or a piano, all of it depends on this ability to write this kind of full harmony that really developed out of the creation of counterpoint and harmony, you know, a little bit earlier in music history. And so knowing how to fit and feel on the inside is something it's just very important and very comforting. I mean, you don't always have to be the leader or the bass. You can you're actually at the center of things, and so it's a very comforting feeling. It's something that I felt that was very natural for me. I mean, when I sang, I didn't sing the lowest part. I didn't sing the highest part. So I was always there in the middle, and the viola was something that also came naturally that way. As a matter of fact, I was introduced to the viola as a high school student.
I was going to ask you when you started playing.
Oh, I was playing the violin from the time I was 6, but when I was 14, that was my first year at Juilliard as a pre-college student.
Wow.
They have a pre-college.
I didn't realize they had a pre-college program.
They have a pre-college that takes people from about 6 or 7 on. And when you're college age, then you can apply for, if you get into the conservatory. And the pre-college, of course, has probably even more talented people than the college. I mean, it's just totally amazing what young people can do. And I went to Juilliard pre-college when I was 14, and I remember being in a string ensemble on Saturday afternoons, and having the music director look around the room at the beginning of the semester and say, "Okay, well, we need a violist. We need violists for orchestra. So who will play? And he pointed to me. You, just I was just designated to do this, and of course I had no idea what a viola was, and there was a closet that had violas in it, and you open it and you look at it, and they look like big violins, and you try it, and you thought, oh, not so bad. The only problem is that it reads a different clef, so you have to learn how to read music all over again, and it also suited me because I have rather large hands, very long arms. And so it was very comfortable, where a violin I end up playing,
all
like
hunched
that.
up.
That's right. So in a number of ways, it seemed to just fall into what I did naturally. And also at the same time, I was at Juilliard. Pre-college, I was at the High School of Music and Art in New York, and the same scenario played itself. And I ended up playing viola in the senior string quartet for, I guess, the first 2 years I was there, and then I was the first violinist in the senior string quartet. By the time I was a senior, but I enjoyed. That was my introduction to playing viola.
So, at what point? I mean, I presume you can still play the violin, obviously.
Yes,
but
I can.
But when did the viola become your primary instrument?
When I went to conservatory.
So it was when you went to Juilliard to college.
That's right. Yes, and I was pretty much told, I said, well, you're not going to be a great violinist, and this is.
That's rather presumptuous of them, isn't it?
Well, it's presumptuous, but when I was in high school and in the pre-college at Juilliard, I played somewhere in the viola section, and in the back of the violin section was Itzhak Perlman and Pinchas Zuckerman, and they weren't up front; they were they were somewhere in the back, and so I thought, well.
Point taken.
Yeah.
So Robin in St. Petersburg, Florida asks, what is the range of music courses offered at MIT today?
The range of music courses, soup to nuts, everything. It starts with fundamentals for people who need to learn the lines and the spaces and the sharps and flats, scales and things like that, rhythm. Then you can go on to a series called Harmony and Counterpoint, where I think there are 3 levels of that. There are one in each semester, which is a very short time in which to do that, but I think when I took it, I took it in 2 schools, as a matter of fact, growing up, and each of those classes lasted a full year. It's hard work, but MIT, they can do it. So that's sort of the technical
so it sounds like music has its own fire hose here. It's not just the engineering.
Absolutely. There's also a basic subject in, what would you call it? It's a survey. It's called History of Western Music, I guess. But there's also a history of non-Western music. So we've grown this phenomenal opportunity to study music of the world, which includes Balinese music and African music, and Indian music, and jazz, and I guess other kinds of American music, folk
Don't we
music.
have a gamelan?
We
band?
do. That's the Balinese.
Yeah.
Yes, there are 2 gamelans and 2 gamelan opportunities taught by 2 of our professors, yes.
Fascinating. So, Julia,
and that's just the
the foundational courses.
Those are the courses, and then there are courses in culture of musical culture and history, and then of course there are the ensembles. There's African drumming, there are jazz ensembles. There's a small chamber chorus, a large chorus.
And those count as course credit?
They do.
Can you do them extracurricularly, not
Yeah.
as course?
Yes, you can, and this is one of the things that that's a difference at MIT, that you can do these, that you have a simultaneous population there. The requirement is that you have to get in by audition, But once in, you're required to do the same thing as everyone else, and that is be present, be prepared, and perform at the end of the semester. And if you want to take it for credit and use it as part of the credit leading to your degree, you can do that. If not, you can just do it for fun, but you're there with the same seriousness and commitment as everyone else.
That is different than most places, and
Yeah.
that's fascinating. So Julia in Pittsburgh asks us, how does MIT's music department collaborate with brain and cognitive science or linguistics? This may go to that student you were talking about who was doing some research and had it published. Do these new developments interest you?
They interest me, but given my other interests,
You have a pretty full plate.
and given the fact that I do need to practice, like every other working musician, they're not something that I do in the forefront. I think recently, as recently as last year, we had a music major graduate with a double major in music and brain and cognitive science. So it is something that can happen on the undergraduate level. And of course, the student that I mentioned, the PhD student, is someone who's taking chamber music, who's an accomplished viola player, and who is working on the graduate level and really in the forefront of this kind of thinking, able to do that here at MIT. Of course, that's another thing that makes MIT special, that there is this ability to do interdisciplinary work and to collaborate.
Well, and that you would have such high quality programs in both music and brain and cognitive science in the same institute.
Right. And I always tell people when they ask about something like that, well, can I do this, can I do that? I said, if you don't see it, invent it. Because MIT is exactly the kind of place where you can pull things together that fit your interest and your imagination. You'll find the high quality on both sides or all sides.
Right. Ani in New York says 60 Minutes profiled another virtuoso pianist the other night who has been working with Wynton Marsalis performing at Lincoln Center as a 12-year-old. Do you approve of giving children at such young ages such exposure? When does pushing a talented child become too much, in your opinion?
Oh, that's a big question. I think I certainly grew up seeing lots of people being pushed. Some of them are no longer in the profession, and some of them who weren't pushed but who are obviously very talented are. I think that's something that each family has to decide.
Do you feel you were pushed, or did you push yourself?
I was pushed at first, and then I think I sort of led the way. I mean, I have an older sister, so the two of us were involved in music and intensely involved in music. And our parents just made sure that we had what we wanted next. And I think our teachers tried to guide us that way. And of course, in the whole crowd of other people doing that, there'll always be some who are more pushed than others. There'll be some who are hugely better developed at an early age. And of course, you want to show that off. It's very hard to say. I mean, there are all kinds of examples. I mean, if you look at Mozart was phenomenal. Mendelssohn was phenomenal. And they had ambitious parents. And they turned out well, for the most part. I mean, they died at half my age. But, but they also contributed a huge amount. It's just hard to say.
Were your parents musicians?
They were not professional musicians, but they were very musical people, and they were people who didn't have a lot, but they considered music extremely important for us, and so they made sure that that's what we had.
Mikhail in Medford asks, I read and enjoy your blog on the Chamber Society website, and I've been to several concerts in town.
Thank you.
Where are the best spaces to perform, in your opinion? Does a new high-tech venue like Rockport's appeal to you as much as old halls? What's on your bucket list in terms of places you haven't played yet?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, Rockport's a great place, and my colleague David DeVoe, who is a wonderful pianist and who teaches piano at MIT, is the music director there and had a lot to do with designing that hall. It's one of the few places in the world that I can walk into and look around and say, this was designed for what I do. You know, it's a hall that's just the right size for chamber music. And as a matter of fact, I might as well get in a plug and say it's the one thing that's really missing in the Boston area. You know, we have great halls, Jordan Hall, Kresge Auditorium, Sanders Theater, and these seat 1,100 people. We don't have a hall that seats 500, 600 people, 700 people, for that middle-sized audience that needs big things but also would appreciate small things. And it's just one of those deficits that you just wonder, well, how did that happen? And you know, what can be done about that? I think Jordan Hall is one of the jewels in the crown. I think it's one of the most amazing spaces in the entire country. I don't think there's another one like it. And I think if you took someone in there blindfolded and then ripped it off and said, well, where are you? They would probably choose Holland or Germany or something like that. And then you say, no, you're right here at New England Conservatory. And similarly, when you go into Sanders Theater and you see the space that's that's being pictured right there, it shows you know, it's an old building from the 1800s, late 1800s, and it has an acoustic. It has a way of treating the sound that's hard to get in modern buildings, and part of it is because there's a lot of detail and a lot of ways for the sound to go around and be caressed in that space. So it would be nice to have a hall of the right size to do chamber music. I'm not a great fan of halls that electronically or mechanically reproduce the sound or enhance the sound.
So, did you tell us what's on your bucket list in terms of places you haven't played?
Places I haven't played.
That you want to?
Oh my goodness. Well, I have not been to Australia. I don't know what's there, but I've...
Oh, we have some alumni down there who could probably help you out.
Okay, great. I'd like that. I'd like that. No, I've been really fortunate. I've really been blessed to play in a number of the major halls in the country, and I can't think of one that. Of course, I'd like to return to all of them.
Right, right.
But no, I think you know, I've played at Carnegie Hall at an early age. I played my debut recital in what is now Weill Hall at Carnegie Hall. I haven't played yet in Zankel Hall, which is also another one at Carnegie Hall. I've played in. So I've played in a number of the great halls in New York and in Washington D.C. You know, I've played with you know, in the Terrace Theater. I've played recitals there, and I've played in the Orchestra Hall with the National Symphony. I've played in Orchestra Hall in Chicago, Orchestra Hall in Minneapolis, Herbst Theater in San Francisco, and even in the old Gardner Museum. You know, that was
Do they
very
all
nice.
have a different feel? I mean,
They do. They do.
And you remember that pretty vividly, it sounds like.
Yes. You remember that, and you remember the placement of the audience and what it's like when you're playing to them, because you want to direct your energy to people. And if you're too high up on a stage, and it feels a little odd if you you adjust to it.
Especially for chamber music, where you're used to a more intimate setting.
That's right. Yes.
So Renata in Newton asks, have you considered giving online classes, if they do not yet exist, for alumna music lovers like me? Are there any music department MOOCs?
I think there is one that Michael Cuthbert, one of our professors, is offering. I don't think it's in performance. I think it's it's one of the music fundamentals classes, as a matter of fact, that is introductory for people. And I think you'd have to look into that.
Which is probably useful for somebody who wants to appreciate music more.
Yes.
Understanding the fundamentals is going to make that much
Absolutely. So remember
richer.
Michael Cuthbert. He's the person to look for.
Ibrahim in Seattle asks if you would please talk about the pressures of studying at Juilliard and working under one faculty member for so many years. Last year's movie Whiplash gave music schools a bad rap for these top-tier schools that are like pressure cookers.
Well, I'm not the right person to ask for that because I think it was a couple of years after I got out of Juilliard, and this is, you have to realize, I went there when I was 14 as a high school student, and I left in 1970 after finishing my doctorate. So this is,
You were there for a long time.
I was there for 10 years,
Yeah.
3 years in the, so I think it was 2 or 3 years after that I found out that this was a really difficult place and it was a pressure cooker and that I should really be frightened for my life and well-being. And I thought, oh, well, okay.
I survived.
Yeah, I mean, yes, you do have disappointments and the pressures of seeing people getting rewarded and you not or something like that. But the thing is, you have to understand, this was from the time I was in high school right through here. Every day of the week, you are in touch with the most inspiring item, music. Not to mention the people who do it very well. And if you're elevated by that, it seems to, at least for me, it seemed to protect me against anything else.
Yeah.
It was
The joy of that outweighed the pressure of
the
performance.
joy of that was just unspeakable. It continues to be. I mean, just thinking about it. I used to tell people the happiest time of my life was in high school. I mean, which is supposed to be the worst time.
Right.
And it's because you'd walk into school and part of the day, one period you had to work on a major Mendelssohn work. Another period of the day you're working on a Beethoven, or you're writing music exercises or something.
Well, you've discovered the secret of life, which is figuring out what you love doing more than anything else in the world, and then figuring out how to get someone to pay you to do it.
Thank you.
So I think that's brilliant. Do we have time for one more question? Okay. The last question will be from Beth in DC. She says, I plan to hear Marcus play in DC in March. Please provide times, locations. I will pass info along to the MIT Club of DC. I did not plant that one, I promise.
Well, I know it's the New Orchestra of Washington, NOW, and that's all I know.
All right. We will figure this out and get the word
yes.
to the club so that they will know.
And come backstage. I'd like to meet you.
Well, I'm thinking the club might even want to do a group outing to
Yes.
one of your concerts and then maybe invite you to join them for something afterwards. I don't know. Anyway, on behalf of the MIT Alumni Association, thank you, Marcus, for this engaging conversation. And thanks to our viewing audience for joining us. Alumni, if we didn't get to your question, we will pass all of the remaining questions on to Professor Thompson after the webcast. Please feel free to share other questions or comments on Twitter using the hashtag MIT Faculty. You can also view an archive of past faculty forums online by visiting the Learning section in the Alumni Association website. And please join us next month for another session of Faculty Forum Online.